In a small town in Michigan, James Carter owned a struggling auto repair shop. On a cold Thanksgiving evening, when most people were celebrating with their families, James chose to help a stranded family with car trouble. He gave up his own holiday plans to fix their vehicle. The simple act of kindness led to an incredible turn of events that would change his life forever. James Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at his small auto repair shop's accounts. The numbers weren't good. Bills kept piling up, and customers were becoming scarce in their small Michigan town. The cold November wind rattled the workshop windows as he sat alone in his office. His phone buzzed. It was his sister Marie. "Are you still coming for Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow? The kids really want to see their Uncle James," she said. James smiled, thinking about his niece and nephew. "Of course, I'll be there at 5, he replied. The next day, James spent the morning working on a few cars. The holiday season was tough. Many people were leaving town to visit family, and his business was slower than ever. He could barely afford to pay his 2 employees their wages. At 4:30 p.m., James locked up the shop. He put on his worn jacket and headed to his truck. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and snow was starting to fall. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello, is this Carter's Auto Repair?" a worried woman's voice asked. "Our car broke down on Highway 23. We've been calling every shop in the area. Nobody is answering because of Thanksgiving. We have 2 small children with us." James looked at his watch. His sister was expecting him. The family would be disappointed. But something in the woman's voice made his decision clear. "Where exactly are you located?" "I'll be there to help," he said. "Thank you so much. We're near mile marker 45. The car just stopped working. We were driving to Chicago to visit my mother in the hospital," the woman explained. Her voice was shaking from the cold. James called his sister. "Marie, I'm sorry. There's a family stranded on the highway. They have kids with them. I need to help them." Marie understood. That was just who her brother was, always putting others first. He drove through the growing snowstorm. After 20 minutes, he saw a black SUV on the side of the road. A man was standing outside, waving his flashlight. A woman sat in the car with 2 children, trying to keep them warm. The man introduced himself as David. "We're so grateful you came out on Thanksgiving. Every other place was closed." "We didn't know what to do," David said, his relief obvious in his voice. James got to work immediately. The temperature was dropping fast, and he wanted to get this family back on their way as quickly as possible. Little did he know, this Thanksgiving sacrifice would lead to something extraordinary. James opened the hood of the SUV and checked the engine. Despite the expensive car model, it had a serious fuel injection problem. The repair would take at least 3 hours. The snow was getting heavier, and the wind was picking up. "Your car needs major repairs. It's not safe to drive like this," James told David. "The nearest open shop is 2 hours away in Chicago. I can fix it here, but it will take some time." The 2 children in the back seat were wrapped in blankets, looking scared. The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, spoke softly. "We need to reach Chicago tonight. My mother had a heart attack. The doctors say." Her voice cracked with emotion. David held her hand to comfort her. James thought for a moment. "My shop is 10 minutes away. I can tow your car there and fix it properly. It's warmer, and there's a small waiting area for your family." The couple agreed, grateful for his help. At the shop, James worked quickly under the bright lights. He noticed David making several phone calls, speaking quietly. Sarah helped the children with coloring books she found in her bag. They looked expensive, like everything else they had. The hours passed. James's hands were cold and sore, but he kept working. He saw how worried Sarah was about her mother. He thought about his own mom, who he had lost 2 years ago. He understood their rush to reach Chicago. Around 9 p.m., the repair was finally done. James had replaced several parts, working as fast as he could. When David asked for the bill, James hesitated. The parts alone cost over $800. For a family rushing to see a sick mother on Thanksgiving, it felt wrong to charge full price. Just pay for the parts. No labor charge today, James said. David tried to argue, but James refused. Consider it a Thanksgiving gift. Just get your family to Chicago safely. Sarah had tears in her eyes as she hugged James. As they prepared to leave, David handed James his business card. Thank you. You gave up your holiday to help strangers. People like you are rare, David said. James put the card in his pocket without looking at it. He was just happy to help. The family drove away into the snowy night. James closed his shop, exhausted but satisfied. He never expected that this business card would soon change everything. The real surprise was still to come. The next morning, James arrived at his shop early. He found the business card David had given him and finally read it. His eyes widened. David Thompson, CEO of Thompson Automotive Industries ***, the largest car parts manufacturer in the Midwest. James could hardly believe it. He had helped the CEO of a billion-dollar company. But he didn't regret charging only for parts. He had done what felt right, regardless of who they were. A week passed. James focused on his work, struggling to keep his shop running. He had to let one of his employees go. The bills were becoming too much to handle. The bank was threatening to foreclose on his shop. One cold December morning, a black limousine pulled up outside. David Thompson stepped out, wearing a suit that probably cost more than James's monthly income. "Good morning, James. Do you have a moment to talk?" Inside the office, David got straight to the point. "After you helped us, we made it to Chicago in time. Sarah's mother is recovering well. But that's not why I'm here. Your kindness that night impressed me deeply." David continued, "I did some research on your shop. You're known for honest work and fair prices. People trust you. That's exactly what I need." James listened, confused about where this was going. "I'm expanding Thompson Automotive. We're opening authorized service centers across the country. I want your shop to be our first flagship location," David explained. "We'll provide full funding for renovation, new equipment, and staff training." James sat in silence, trying to process what he was hearing. "But my shop is small. I can barely keep it running," he said honestly. David smiled. "That's exactly why I'm here. You proved your character on Thanksgiving. Money can't buy integrity like yours. We'll keep your name on the shop. You'll remain the owner, but with our full backing. No more financial struggles. What do you say?" David held out a contract. The terms were incredible. Full autonomy, guaranteed supply of parts, and a partnership that would solve all his money problems. James thought about all the times he had helped people like he helped David's family. How many times he had reduced prices for those in need. Now, that same kindness was coming back in ways he never imagined. James signed the contract with shaking hands. Within weeks, his small shop transformed. New equipment arrived daily. The worn-out sign was replaced with a sleek new one, Carter's Auto Care, a Thompson Automotive partner. His old employee returned, along with 5 new skilled mechanics. James kept his policy of fair pricing and honest work. The shop's reputation grew quickly. People came from neighboring towns, trusting the Carter name. Sarah Thompson visited one day with her children. "My mother asks about you often," she told James. "She says you're the reason she got to see her grandchildren that Thanksgiving." The kids gave James a drawing they made of him fixing cars. David's support went beyond business. He invited James to industry events, introducing him to important people. "This is the man who showed me what true service means," David would say. James stayed humble, treating every customer the same way. One morning, a familiar face walked in. It was Marie, James's sister. She looked around the transformed shop with tears in her eyes. Mom and Dad would be so proud, she said softly. Remember how Dad always said kindness comes back to you? The shop's success allowed James to start a program helping low-income families with car repairs. He remembered his own struggles and wanted to help others. David fully supported this initiative, matching every dollar James put into it. Local news channels ran stories about the shop. They called it the Thanksgiving Miracle. But James knew it wasn't just about that one night. It was about every time he had chosen to be kind, every customer he had helped despite his own problems. During the next Thanksgiving, James hosted a dinner at his shop for employees and their families. David and Sarah Thompson joined them. As James looked around at all the smiling faces, he realized how much his life had changed in 1 year. You know what makes this special? David said during dinner. You're still the same person who helped us that night. Success hasn't changed your heart. James nodded, understanding that his greatest wealth wasn't in his bank account, but in the lives he touched. 3 years after that snowy Thanksgiving night, Carter's Auto Care became a model for all Thompson automotive service centers. James now oversees 10 locations across Michigan, each following his principles of honest service and kindness. Every Thanksgiving, James keeps his original shop open for emergencies. His team volunteers to help stranded travelers, never charging labor costs that day. It's our way of keeping the spirit of that night alive, James tells new employees. Sarah's mother recovered fully and often visits the shop. She brings cookies and tells everyone how James's kindness gave her extra years with her grandchildren. The drawing those kids made still hangs in James's office, reminding him where it all started. The bank that once threatened to foreclose now features James in their small business success stories. But he makes sure they include how David Thompson took a chance on someone just because of an act of kindness. James created a foundation helping young people learn auto repair. Everyone deserves a chance, he says. David matches every donation, turning the foundation into a $1 million program. Many students get jobs at Thompson Automotive after graduating. Marie's children now work at the shop during summer breaks. Uncle James taught us that being kind is the best business plan, his nephew tells customers. James smiles every time he hears this, knowing his parents would have loved seeing their grandchildren learn this lesson. Last week, another stranded family came to the shop. James worked on their car himself, just like old times. The father asked why such a successful business owner still worked on cars. James smiled and told him the Thanksgiving story. Sometimes the smallest choices have the biggest impact, James said. I could have driven past that family in the snow. Instead, I stopped. That choice changed everything. The man nodded, understanding the deeper message. Today, James's shop is more than a business. It's a symbol of how kindness can transform lives. Every car that leaves his shop carries this story, spreading hope that good things happen to good people. Here's a continuation inspired by the story. Years passed, and James's name became synonymous with trust and kindness. His shop grew from a single location to a network of service centers across the Midwest, all adhering to his principles of honesty and fair pricing. Carter's Auto Care wasn't just a business, it was a beacon of hope and compassion. James was now mentoring other small business owners who were struggling, much like he once had. He established a program to offer grants and guidance to entrepreneurs who showed integrity and commitment to their communities. David Thompson remained a close friend and collaborator, often joining James in outreach programs. One particularly snowy winter evening, as James was closing up his flagship shop, a young man walked in, shivering and holding a small toolbox. "Are you Mr. Carter?" the young man asked. James nodded, offering the man a seat and a warm drink. "What can I do for you?" The man introduced himself as Alex, a mechanic who had just lost his job at a nearby shop that had shut down. He'd heard about James's reputation and came seeking an opportunity. "I don't have much experience, but I work hard and learn fast," Alex said earnestly. James smiled, seeing a reflection of his younger self in the man's eyes. "Let's see what you've got," he said, leading Alex to the garage. That night, Alex demonstrated his skills and willingness to learn. James offered him a job on the spot, and Alex quickly became one of the most dedicated mechanics on the team. As the years went by, Alex rose through the ranks and eventually became the manager of one of the Carter's auto care branches. James often thought about how life had a way of bringing the right people together when kindness led the way. On the 10th anniversary of the Thanksgiving night that changed everything, James hosted a grand event at his shop. The Thompsons, his employees, their families, and customers from across the state gathered to celebrate. During the event, David Thompson gave a heartfelt speech. James Carter is proof that a single act of kindness can ripple out and change countless lives. He didn't just help my family that night, he created a legacy that inspires us all. James, humbled by the praise, took the microphone. It's not about grand gestures, he said. It's about doing the right thing, no matter how small it seems. If we all choose kindness, the world becomes a better place. The crowd erupted in applause, and James looked around, overwhelmed by the impact of his journey. The drawing from Sarah's children still hung on the wall of his office, a reminder of where it all began. James knew that while his success was extraordinary, it wasn't the awards, the expansion, or the recognition that mattered most. It was the lives touched, the hope restored, and the simple truth that kindness, above all, was the best investment he'd ever made. A few months after the anniversary celebration, James received an invitation to speak at a national conference on small business growth and ethics. He was hesitant at first, public speaking wasn't something he was comfortable with, but David encouraged him. Your story isn't just about business, James. It's about values. The world needs more of that, David said. When James took the stage, the room was packed with business owners, entrepreneurs, and aspiring professionals. He stood under the spotlight, his usual humility grounding him. I'm not a man of fancy words, he began, but I've learned that success isn't measured by what you take, it's measured by what you give. 10 years ago, I was just a mechanic struggling to make ends meet. What changed my life wasn't a stroke of luck or a grand plan. It was a choice to help a family in need. He went on to share the story of that Thanksgiving night, the Thompsons' unexpected generosity, and how his philosophy of kindness became the foundation of his business. The audience was silent, hanging on to his every word. By the end of his speech, James received a standing ovation. Several attendees approached him afterward, sharing how his story had inspired them to rethink their own businesses and lives. One woman, a single mother running a small bakery, told him, "You've given me hope that even in tough times, doing the right thing can lead to something beautiful." James returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about running a successful business anymore, it was about spreading the message that compassion could transform communities. Over the next few years, James expanded his foundation. He partnered with schools to provide scholarships for students interested in trade professions, particularly auto repair. He believed in creating opportunities for those who didn't have the means to pursue higher education but had the talent and drive to succeed. One day, Alex, the young mechanic James had hired years ago, approached him with an idea. "Why don't we start a mobile repair service for people who can't make it to the shop? Single parents, elderly folks, people in rural areas, they're the ones who need us the most." James loved the idea. Together, they launched Carter's Mobile Care, a fleet of service vans equipped to handle on-the-spot repairs. The initiative quickly gained traction, earning praise for its innovative approach to helping underserved communities. The Thompsons remained closely involved in James's ventures. Sarah often visited the shops, bringing her children, who were now teenagers, to volunteer during special events. Her mother, who had fully recovered, became a beloved figure at the original shop, baking cookies for employees and sharing stories of gratitude with customers. One winter evening, as James was closing up, he noticed a young girl standing outside, clutching a handmade sign. It read, "Thank you, Carter's Auto Care." James invited her inside, where she explained that her mother had been one of the recipients of the shop's low-income repair program. "Because of you, my mom could get to work every day. She says you saved our family," the girl said with tears in her eyes. Moments like these reminded James why he started it all. As the years rolled on, James's influence grew beyond Michigan. His story was featured in books, documentaries, and even a TED Talk titled "The Power of Small Choices." But James remained grounded, still working in his shop on occasion and personally mentoring new mechanics. One day, David Thompson made an unexpected proposal. "James, we've built something extraordinary together. But I think it's time we take this global. Let's bring Carter's Auto Care to every corner of the world." James, though flattered, took his time to consider. His heart was in the local communities he'd nurtured, and he feared losing the personal touch that made his business unique. After much thought, he agreed on one condition. "We'll expand, but only if we keep the heart of the business intact. Every location must follow the same principles: honesty, fairness, and kindness above profit." David wholeheartedly agreed, and together, they launched Carter's Auto Care internationally. The brand became a symbol of integrity, proving that a business built on kindness could thrive on any scale.